I'm Liz Wells. I'm the research and knowledge broker for Our Kids Network. I'll be hosting the webinar for us this morning. So our learning objectives for the webinar are, of course, to increase your understanding of just what is the early development instrument, what are the 5 domains for the early development instrument, and then we'll start looking at some of the results. So hopefully this webinar will increase your understanding of how to interpret EDI results, and so you can be able to apply them to your work. And the other learning objective is that we'll increase awareness of the EDI results for Halton. So as I said at the end of the webinar today, we've saved a little bit of time to talk about just how EDI results are actually used in Halton. So this will help increase your awareness of how to use the EDI to work in, for your work and to work in our communities together. Our Kids Network has been doing this work for a really long time. We've been collecting and sharing data on a diverse set of indicators related to children, youth, and families since 2003. Starting with our community report card in 2004, the network has produced a wide variety of reports, analyses, and different data visualizations. We have a 3-year monitoring cycle in Halton in which we collect and report our data. And this means that we've been able to track the progress of a cohort of children and youth over time. And we collect data spanning age groups from newborns to youth. And we've been doing this every 3 years since 2003. 2018 was another data collection year for us, and that's why these are the most recent results that we have from the EDI. The next would have been 2021, so next year, but unfortunately, because of the challenges related to the pandemic, we will not be conducting another EDI for next year, but hopefully for the following school year, we will. We use a really diverse set of indicators to monitor children and youth well-being in Halton, and these include things like measures of physical health, mental well-being, education, safety, relationships, and of course, risk behaviors, just to name a few, for example. We use a number of different data sources and surveys. For example, we get a lot of great data from public health. They share some of their information with us there related to newborns. We, of course, get a lot of great data from the census, from Statistics Canada. We have a lot of great data from our kindergarten parent survey. That's sort of our companion survey to the early development instrument that asks parents and caregivers of children in kindergarten about their experiences at home, the health and well-being of their kindergarten child, the experiences in the community. And of course, our youth surveys are shared with us from the school board. The latest was the Tell Them For Me or the Our School survey. So all of those reports are available on our website. You can explore them further there. And of course, you can also take a look at them in the OKN data portal. So the OKN data portal is our interactive database of all of our OKN data and census data that allows you to create maps and graphs and charts and explore and visualize data the way you want to see it. A key source of our early years data in Halton is the Early Development Instrument, or the EDI, as we love to shorten things. And we know that early childhood development is one of the most important determinants of health and well-being across the life course. In Halton, we monitor the developmental progress of our children with the EDI. The EDI helps us understand how children in Halton are doing developmentally. Essentially, the EDI measures developmental readiness. Developmental readiness refers to a child's ability to meet age-appropriate developmental expectations in 5 different domains. And we'll go through those domains this morning, and you can learn a little bit more about what they are and how they're assessed. So when you're thinking about the EDI, what's the EDI? It's a measure of developmental health at 5 years of age. And developmental health includes children's physical, social, emotional, language, and cognitive skills. And it's a 103-item questionnaire. And in Ontario, it's completed by kindergarten teachers in February, in March, every 3 years. The EDI is also used, of course, in other parts of the world. For example, in Australia, it's been used there probably the longest, as well as Canada and the United States, and it's used pretty much across Canada. So for those who are interested, you can learn a lot more information about the EDI at the Offord website. So the Offord Centre is out of McMaster University, and they designed the EDI. And along with the Ministry of Education, they are responsible for supporting its implementation in Ontario. Another good source of information about the EDI is the Human Learning Partnership at UBC. These are the 5 domains of the EDI. So we'll just go through each of these and I'll explain them for you. So the first is social competence. And this is really getting at a child's age-appropriate ability to play and to get along with other children, their ability to share, their ability to be confident, to show that they're feeling confident. An example item from the questionnaire for social competence would be, would you say that this child is able to follow one-step instructions? The second domain on the EDI is emotional maturity. And this is really taking a look at a child's ability to concentrate on tasks, how well they're able to help others. Do they show that they want to help others? Do they show patience? Are they often not aggressive or angry? An example item from the questionnaire for emotional maturity would be, would you say that this child comforts a child who is crying or upset? The third domain for the EDI is language and cognitive development, and this is pretty much just as it sounds. This is looking at a child's age-appropriate ability to read and write. Can they count? Do they recognize numbers and shapes? An example item from the questionnaire here is, would you say that this child is able to read simple words? The fourth domain, physical health and well-being, again, is just as it sounds here. It's looking at a child's health, at their independence, and that they're rested each day when they're showing up to school. An example item for this domain on the questionnaire is, would you say that this child is well coordinated? So are they able to move without running into things or tripping over things? And the fifth domain for the EDI, the one in green at the bottom of your screen, is communication skills and general knowledge. And this is sounds a lot like the blue one, language and cognitive development, but it's a little bit different. So this is looking at a child's ability to tell a story, a child's ability to communicate with adults and other children. And an example here, item from the questionnaire is, how would you rate this child's ability to tell a story? So yeah, we're very fortunate in Halton. We've completed 6 cycles of the EDI. So remember, I was talking about, we have a 3-year monitoring cycle in Halton. So we've been doing this since 2003. So that's incredible. It's a very large sample size for us that we're able to monitor the well-being of our youngest kids here in Halton. So for 2018, that means we've had over 30,000 children who have been assessed with the EDI in Halton since 2003. It's incredible. And for 2018, that represents 5,845 children. That's huge. So being able to talk about the EDI results and interpret those results and being able to use them in your work, is crucial that we spend a little bit of time here talking about how to understand those results. Typically, when we talk about the EDI, we're really talking about the percent or the number of children who are developmentally vulnerable. And vulnerable means those are the children who are struggling. So those are the children who are not on track. And vulnerability is determined by cut points. Each of the domains on the EDI is scored from 0 to 10, and a higher score indicates stronger developmental skills. So that we can talk about a whole population of children, all of those scores within all of the 5 domains are grouped into these 3 categories that you see here on your screen, the red, the blue, and the green. Right? Today, we're really focusing on the vulnerable category, and that's the small red section on the left part of your screen. This category represents all of the children whose scores fall below a certain cut point. This is the developmentally vulnerable cut point. And really, it just means that these are the children who are scoring below the 10th percentile of the entire baseline, Ontario baseline population, excuse me. EDI scores in Halton and all of Ontario are compared against what they call the Ontario baseline population. And all that is, the baseline population was collected on more than 120,000 children from 2003 to 2006 across all of Ontario. And it was just that was what they used to establish the cut points that I've been talking to you about here. So really, there's only two things that you need to really worry about here. Vulnerable are the kids that are struggling. So those are the ones in that red category there. And that's what we're focusing on today for this webinar. And the other is when we're talking about that they've been put into this vulnerable category, it's in comparison to all of Ontario. So it's not in comparison just to Halton, pretty much is what I'm saying. So why does this matter? Why would we be so concerned about vulnerability? What are some of the reasons why we would be monitoring the developmental health of the youngest members of our population here in Halton? Why does vulnerability matter so much? The early years of childhood really form the basis of their intelligence, their personality, their social behaviors, their capacity to learn, right? And also their ability to nurture oneself as they get older and as they're an adult. There is a lot of evidence that links a child's early experiences to their future well-being. So that the bonds that they form with their parents, the first learning experiences that they have, all of those things are linked to a child's future physical, cognitive, emotional, and social development. So yes, optimizing the early years is really one of the best investments that we as a community can make to ensuring a child's future success. So for example, there's been tons of research and literature that has looked at the predictive validity of the EDI. So how well does it predict something that happens to a child later in life? And a lot of this research has been carried out in Canada and Australia, where the EDI has been used the most. And for example, the 5 domains of the EDI and whether a child was vulnerable or not predicted their ability to achieve basic academic their scores in grades 3 and grade 4 on the EQAO, for example, and the social and emotional domains of the EDI predicted a child's emotional well-being and their peer relationships at age 10, and even their mental health and their mental well-being. So the EDI is a really great resource for us because it helps us understand at the community level how a whole population of children are doing. It helps us identify areas of strength where there could be potential gaps. It gives us an ability to monitor everybody over time. It gives us a really great picture of what early learning is looking like at the community level so that, yes, we can identify gaps potentially in programs and services and areas that we should be focusing on to support families and to support children. So 28% of children in Halton are vulnerable on one or more domains of the EDI. And for 2018, that represents 1,663 children who would be considered vulnerable on one or more domains of the EDI. So let's start digging into these results a little bit more so we can get a better understanding of exactly what's happening in Halton. So this is a line graph that's showing you the developmental health of our kindergarten children over time. And it's reflecting the percent of senior kindergarten children who are vulnerable or on one or more domains of the EDI. And you can see across the bottom axis is the years 2003 to 2018. So that's all of our data. And then up the vertical or the y-axis is the percent. So 20 to 35% is what I have illustrated here. And in this case, higher scores indicate higher vulnerability. And then you can see the blue is for Ontario, and then the green is Halton underneath it. And generally, the findings are telling us right now that in Halton, we are at our all-time poorest developmental health. So, while we were generally always much healthier than the province, the blue, we are really catching up in the percent of our children who would be developmentally vulnerable. And you can see, I hope, that the rate at which we're declining or our vulnerability is increasing is actually faster. So it's steeper than it is compared to the province. So if you take a look at 2012, when that's sort of in the middle of your screen there, when we were probably doing our best in terms of lower rates of vulnerability, we were at 23.8%. And then the next time we did it in 2015, you can see there was a very sharp increase up to 28%. And while there was an increase for the province as well, ours was much steeper in terms of the increase that we had there in the percent of children who were developmentally vulnerable. And while we have leveled off from 2015 to 2018, there is not a significant difference there in the percent of children who are vulnerable you can see there's really not much of a change. So potentially we're stabilizing, but we'll have no idea until we do the next cycle of the EDI, which I guess will probably be in 2022. But it's really hard to say because you have to consider as well the pandemic and all of the different things that are happening right now in terms of changes to routine, changes in people being able to access services, being able to go to school, being able to play in the park, right? So it'll be really interesting to see what's happening the next time we're able to do the EDI and the kindergarten parent survey. So hopefully we'll see some improvement in our next cycle, but I really can't say for sure. So the key takeaway message from that overview of how we're doing over time in Halton in comparison to the province is that developmental vulnerability in the 2018 kindergarten cohort, while it is similar to our 2015 rates, it remains at a historical high for us here in Halton. So this is something that I am quite concerned about. Okay, so remember the 5 domains that we talked a little bit about at the beginning. These are how we're doing on each of those 5 domains. So while it's important to get that global overall sense on how we're doing in terms of vulnerability, it's important that we take a look and unpack those findings further by each of the domains. So at the very top in gray, that's our scores for physical health and well-being. So you can see 15.8 of children are vulnerable on that particular domain. And in fact, physical health and well-being is the domain that has the highest percentage of children who are developmentally vulnerable. Following that is in yellow and red, there is social competence and emotional maturity at 9.3%. So there are 9.3% of children who are vulnerable on those 2 domains. And then following that in green on the bottom is communication skills and general knowledge. So that's 8.8% of children are vulnerable on that particular domain. And then the domain that sees the fewest percentage of, or the smallest percentage of children vulnerable is language and cognitive development at 6.4%. So another way to be able to look at those results for each of those domains, again, is over time. And this is exactly like the last line graph we were taking a look at, where you have the percent vulnerable up the vertical axis and the years across the horizontal axis. And you can see, just as we were looking at in the previous slide, physical health and well-being is that gray line on the top. And you can see, yes, that has, because it's higher, that has the highest number of vulnerable children, right? So that's just over 15% for 2018, and it was around the same amount for 2015. So there's not been a significant change in that over the 2 years. And if you look back at 2012, you see that same pattern, right? Where we see that steep increase from 2012 to 2015 in the percent of children who were considered developmentally vulnerable on these domains. So it's also physical health and well-being. Emotional maturity is the one in red there. And in yellow is social competence, and in green is communication skills and general knowledge. So that sees a slightly less steep increase there. So you can see we pretty much, and also blue went up a little bit, but that wasn't significant. So, and the blue is the language and cognitive development. And you'll remember that that was the domain that had the smallest percentage of children who would be considered developmentally vulnerable. So, as I said, for physical health and well-being, there's not a significant change between 2015 to 2018. But what's interesting, from 2015 to 2018, we start to see a decrease in the percentage of children who would be vulnerable. So those kids who aren't doing so well, those kids who are struggling in social competence, emotional maturity, and communication skills and general knowledge, it's starting to decrease. However, we're starting to see an increase in that area where we're in language and cognitive development. So you're starting to see a significant increase in the percent of children who are vulnerable in language and cognitive development, while the others are trending downwards. So the key message from that bit of information is that we are seeing significant statistical improvements in social competence and emotional maturity, but what we need to keep an eye out on for the next cycle is this deterioration or this increase in the percent of children who would be considered vulnerable in language and cognitive development. And what does that mean? And what should we be doing to reflect on those and unpack these results further? So another really important way to take a look at the EDI results in Halton is by taking a look at what's happening in all of our different communities. So what you're looking at right now is a map of the 27 different neighborhoods in Halton. The colors in the legend represent, on the right side of your screen there, represent the percent of children who are developmentally vulnerable on one or more domains of the EDI. So this is that more global measure. So the red indicates higher vulnerability. That's ranging from 34 to 41%. The blue indicates lower levels of vulnerability. So that's ranging from 20, for here, it's ranging from 21 to 25.7%. And then in the middle is the green and the yellow. So let's just take a look at this. So for example, at the very bottom of the map, so at the south end of Halton, you can see this little red neighborhood, South Central Oakville. And for 2018, they had the highest percentage of children who are developmentally vulnerable on one or more domains of the EDI. So it was 41%. 41% of children in that neighborhood are vulnerable. Compare that, for example, to River Oaks, in the middle of your screen there, in the middle of the map, just below Milton, where only 21.7% of children are vulnerable. Or, for example, South Georgetown, up there in the north in Halton Hills, with 21%. So South Georgetown is the neighborhood in Halton with the lowest percent of children who are vulnerable on one or more domains of the EDI. Right, so what drives these differences? That's why it's important to explore these results at the neighborhood level. We want to be able to identify communities with the greatest need and then explore that data further, and other community data. So other bits of information that might be important to think about. What services are available? How are families experiencing the community? What other information might we need to better understand these results? Who can we partner with to increase our understanding of these results? So exploring the results at the local neighborhood level allows us to collaborate. It allows us to work together so we can develop targeted programs, services, and initiatives to better support children's development and parenting in those communities. And it allows us to do it in a way that will work for those communities on the ground. So the key message from that bit of information is it's important to take a look at these results at the local level, because developmental vulnerability varies by geography, just as I was showing you, and of course by domain. I just want to give you an overview just of how some of these findings from the EDI have been used in Halton. And we're very fortunate because we've been doing this for such a long time in Halton. And the EDI actually reflects one of our best pieces of data that does get put into action. It is used quite broadly. You know, for example, the EDI is often used just to answer questions about early development, areas that we should be focusing on. A lot of people throughout Halton have used it to support grant applications, right? To apply for opening a satellite location, or saying that you're going to be allocating resources to a particular program, or to be opening up a new literacy program or a rec program or something that's supporting childhood development. It's been used to support school improvement plans. It's been used to support professional development within agencies. And of course, probably one of the ways that the EDI is used most often is around planning geographic locations for programs and services and being able to allocate resources. It's also often used as a vehicle to bring stakeholders together to support and promote early childhood development, so that we can better build supports, right? Build resources, develop targeted initiatives and events that support childhood development. So I'm showing you some pictures here on this slide from a number of different events that came out of the Early Years Initiative in Halton. And they used the EDI and other local data to identify 6 different communities in Halton with the greatest need. They worked together to develop local targeted resources and events to reduce developmental vulnerability. For example, the Acton Family Fun Fair. So that Acton had dug really deep into their data and identified that physical health and well-being was something that they wanted to target and be able to work on. So the Acton Family Fun Fair was one way that they were able to promote the importance of physical activity and all of the different actions that would support physical well-being for their youngest kids in Acton. So the key message there is use the EDI. That's really what I'm saying. Use the EDI to develop local strategies to foster and promote healthy child development. So putting it all together, wrapping it up for us, the key findings are developmental vulnerability is similar to our 2015 rates, but it really is at a historical high for Halton. So it's important for us to continue to explore this data by domain and at the neighborhood level. Work with our community partners to explore that data, come together, use the findings, develop local strategies to reduce vulnerability, and find ways to promote early childhood development, because we know that return on investment is huge.